Are you getting caught up in the latest health trends and feeling overwhelmed as to what diet is best? We get it, and that's why, as leaders of wellness in our community, Joanne's Place Health Foods has created the Wellness on Purpose podcast. On this podcast, you can expect community and brand experts to share impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. My name is Marissa Laughlin. I'm a holistic nutritionist in partnership with Joanne's Place and your host for this podcast. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. I say y'all way too much for being a Canadian, but I just feel like it's a fun way to say hello. You know, it's not as dry as the traditional hello sometimes. Anyways, I'm changing it up. Let me know what you think. It's Marissa here, and today we're talking about immunity. Hold up. Don't shut this podcast off just yet, because I know what you're thinking. I know that you are thinking, we've heard it all about immunity. Boost your immune system, build your immune system before the cold and flu season, prevent catching XYZ by supplementing with XYZ. Although we've heard that terminology a lot in the last few years, it is still incredibly relevant to talk about the immune system and how important it is to support it year round. So for today's episode, I have asked naturopathic doctor Brianna Lutz, who is a naturopathic doctor as well as a brand educator and medical advisor on the St. Francis Herb Farm team, to talk about the role of the immune system, how the immune system and the gut are connected, as well as other bodily functions that rely on a healthy immune system, and then how and why it's incredibly important to support the immune system year round. So big long episode here, tons of useful information. Don't panic if you don't have a pen and paper on you, because I'm going to be leaving all of the core details in our show notes on the Joanne's Place website. But without further ado, let's jump right into today's episode. Hello, good morning, Brianna. Welcome to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing so well. Thanks for having me.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you a little bit more. Now, for our listeners, on a previous podcast, I had talked about how we, as Joanne's Place, went to a health conference called the CHFA in Toronto a couple of weeks ago. And I actually had the pleasure of listening to you at one of the talks with St. Francis there. So I got a little insight as to, your knowledge and your background. So I'm really looking forward to talking with you today. But before we get into that, I would love for you just to share with our listeners a little bit more about yourself, who you are, and what are some of your biggest passions?
Sure. So my name is Brianna Lutz, and I'm a naturopathic doctor practicing in Edmonton, Alberta. And I have the pleasure of speaking with St. Francis. I started with them as a student rep when I attended naturopathic school, and I became a medical advisor upon graduation and am their brand education manager. So it gives me the opportunity to engage in conversations such as these. My practice is primarily in women's health, and a big passion and focus of mine is actually in fertility. And I have a 1949 bungalow that I've been renovating. We call her Babs. So some passion projects of renovating and getting my hands dirty, and then also designing. So stimulating all parts of my brain.
I love that you named your house Babs. That's amazing. Like, quick side note, on TikTok, have you seen the girl? Sorry, not girl. She's an older lady and her name's Babs, and she gives like all of these amazing advice on like home and cooking and things like that. Have you seen her before?
I definitely have. I didn't realize her name was Babs, so that's even more perfect. Yeah.
I love that. So great. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I always like to just get to know our interviewers a little bit more on a personal level before we talk about business and health and all of those things. So thanks for sharing that with us. And today, I wanted to talk to you about what seems to be one of the most talked about health topics over the last few years. And I understand why, and I think everyone listening understands why, but It is the immune system. And the immune system and immunity has really had the spotlight for obvious reasons, but it is still a core human function that needs to be supported and worked just like any other part of the body. But sometimes we just need to be reminded about that, and that we should also be prioritizing our immune health year round and year after year after year, not just during the highly transmissible virus season or during cold and flus, or obviously over the last few years. So we're going to get back to the basics and talk about the immune system, but then also talk about, how we can support our bodies year round and really build up and strengthen that immunity. So I want to start there. Can you share with our listeners the basics on what the immune system is and why it is, in fact, so important to be supported year round?
Yeah, and we'll kind of break it down a little bit because obviously the immune system is a really complex topic, and we'll go through some of the layers of what the immune system actually entails. People have entire degrees on the immune system, so to make it to digestible bites today will be important so people understand how the immune system actually functions. The immune system is basically our body's defense to foreign substances, and this can be bacteria, this can be viruses, parasites. But an important factor is that it can differentiate between what is self, so our own cells, and what is non-self. And even in things that are non-self, what is harmful, right? And so that's where the immune system can sometimes get confused. Or when we talk about a balanced immune system, because it's not just about colds and flus and ear infections and that kind of thing. It's also about how your body is discerning these different foreign substances. So that is kind of the basic functioning of the immune system. And so when we look at supporting our immune system year round, it's that we're supporting this overall function over time, right? So it's not just, like you said, highly transmissible virus or cold and flu season, but how does that play into allergy season where there's a predominance of pollen? Or how does this play into preventing you from developing conditions like cancer because your body's able to control cell regulation and cell replication? So, and supporting our overall health in being able to discern and to fight off or mount a response to these things that aren't appropriate to our tissue.
Okay, so many responsibilities of the immune system, which we're going to get into. But first, when you talk about the immune system, where is that actually located in the body?
So the immune system, kind of like, say, a hormonal system, is going to be throughout the entire body, and not just in the body, but on the body. Part of our immune system is also just our protection or layer from the external world, right? So this is going to be our skin. Our skin is part of our immune system. We have bacteria on our skin, which are part of our immune system. And then when we talk about even our digestive tract is basically one long tube that's exposed to the external environment. So this is going to have different cellular layers. We have our gut and our malt, and these are different lymphatic tissues or exposure to the external environment in our digestive tract and our respiratory tract. But then we also look at the function of our white blood cells or our immune cells. And these are made in the bone marrow. So that's like within the spine. And when we produce these different white blood cells, they actually start to differentiate in different lymphatic regions in the body. And it tells that white blood cell what it's going to grow up to be. And then those white blood cells are going to circulate in our major circulatory system, so in our bloodstream. And then it will also come back in circulation in lymphatic tissue as well.
Is the immune system technically, like, quote unquote, always active because it has so many different responsibilities? Or is there ever a time where the immune system is, in a rest and digest stage?
Yeah, so in general, because of these different layers of our immune system, those first defense mechanisms like our skin and bacteria on our skin or bacteria in our gut, those are always technically active, right? Those are always technically there. But then we're looking at also at our immune cells, right? And cells are constantly being turned over. So we're constantly producing white blood cells. They have their lifespan and they're dying off, or they're performing a particular function and they're dying off. So, in that sense, the immune system is technically always active or kind of like bubbling under the surface or vibrating under the surface. There's can be an inciting event, such as an infection, where the immune cells are going to detect that foreign substance and they're going to mount a response and kick the immune system into action. So that is where we're talking about the immune system technically being more active or being more stimulated because it's trying to mount a response to something that's invaded the body or that the body perceives to be a threat.
When the immune system is not essentially in balance or thriving and supporting the body as it needs, what other bodily functions are heavily impacted by this?
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize the different systems that can be affected by their immune system. And if the body is imbalanced and we have scenarios where we're acting against our own tissue, so in autoimmune conditions or various allergies. So, autoimmune conditions, we're attacking self, right? We're attacking cells that are us and not foreign tissue. And this can affect any region of the body. This can include the thyroid gland, so that it's called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. This can affect the digestive system, where we see things like Crohn's or colitis or celiac disease. So it can affect multiple systems. Now, even in situations where it's not a disease or a condition, we can notice that if the immune system is imbalanced, it can affect other systems like our digestive tract. If there's a constant activation or stimulation of the immune system, sometimes we can see histamine responses, and histamine can play a big part in our digestion, where we might have gas and bloating, we might have alterations of bowel movements, we can see migraines with that as well. And then, based on my practice, where I see a lot of women's health conditions, an imbalanced immune system can affect our reproductive system. And a condition called endometriosis is more of an immune disease than it is, say, a reproductive disease, because it's an dysregulation of cells, causing really painful periods and associated digestive conditions. So the immune system is actually quite impactful on our entire body if it's not kept in check.
Wow, so many different functions. And I just think we should come back to the point of like health in general, like no matter what conversation we're having, immune, digestion, the microbiome, whatever it is so, so important for the body to function optimally as a whole. Like, as much as we're talking about immune system today and other individual conversations we've had on the podcast, it's still so, so important to make sure that everything is working together and not only focusing on, one area of your health one time of the year. It should be like this synergistic, holistic support and health that we are focusing on, because everything is connected in the body.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's where like naturopathic medicine really thrives, is that we're seeing how everything is connected. And how we can develop like a systematic and strategic plan to support your system. And part of that being relying on this innate wisdom of the body, right? Because when we zoom back and we see all of these processes happening, it's kind of like that mad scientist on the chalkboard and like all the equations. We can't nitpick or manufacture or try and like support each individual pathway. So we have to zoom back and see how we can support our body's natural way of being.
Yes, I love that. So, speaking of the body's natural way of being, I think one of the biggest contributing factors to Literally everything. And I say that because every person I have interviewed for this podcast, or just I'm also a nutritionist. So I see this in my practice, and other practitioners talk about it as well, as the impact of stress. So,
Mhm.
what does stress do to the immune system, and how can we support it?
Yeah, so there's a few different variables of how stress will impact the immune system because it's also is stress impacting your digestion? Is stress impacting your sleep? Because all of those can also have a negative effect on the immune system. But one of the big players when it comes to how stress affects the immune system is going to be cortisol, which is one of our long-term stress hormones. Cortisol, especially when it's high over time, so significant amounts of stress, too high for too long can basically suppress the immune system's reaction. And I often give the analogy or talk about, say, students like studying for an exam, right? So it's just like it's a lot of late nights, it's lots of high stress, and it's like they're going, and then they write their exam. And then right after they write that exam and they're on Christmas vacation, boom, they get sick. It's because they've been riding this like high wave of cortisol. The cortisol drops and then their immune system can finally like jump back into action. So cortisol specifically can definitely suppress the immune system. And we even see that from a synthetic perspective where we're using like steroids. Steroids are very similar to cortisol, where we're using steroids to suppress the immune system. So if you understand how steroids work, you can see that kind of crossover of how cortisol can actually suppress the immune system as well.
Okay, so stress, obviously a big impact on the immune system, but what other things can weaken the immune system?
Mhm. Another big one is not getting enough sleep. Like sleep is so paramount to our health and our immune system specifically. And the different stages of sleep are about repair in the body. It's about making specific immune cells in your system. And if you're not getting adequate sleep and cycling through the different stages of sleep, this is going to be really impactful. Also, when we look at how hormones and stress kind of communicates in our system, the opposite hormone of cortisol, so when cortisol drops at night, melatonin rises. And melatonin is a fantastic regulatory component of our immune system, so much that we're seeing benefits of melatonin therapy in certain conditions to actually help regulate the immune system and the immune system's functioning. So those like stress and sleep are so huge when it comes to the immune system. Things that will create like an inflammatory response. So like sugar is not the best thing for the immune system, and not just like sugar in general. And it's so funny because we're chatting about this on Halloween and all the sugar. It's not necessarily the amount of sugar that somebody's consuming. Part of it can also be related to blood sugar regulation. So if we see constant like spikes and crashes in blood sugar, or then therefore creating issues with insulin, this can weaken the immune system as well. And then certain like lifestyle factors like smoking is going to be a huge one that weakens the immune system. So again, those lifestyle factors. In my practice, oftentimes when we evaluate root cause and develop a strategic or systematic plan, sometimes it's not about what you are doing, it's about what you're not. And I talk about this in nutrition a lot as well. It's not necessarily like the foods that you're eating that are causing the issue. It's what you're not including in your nutrition or in your diet. And nutrient density is huge. If we don't have nutrient dense food, we're not getting those specific micronutrients that are going to support the functioning of the immune system. So building specific immune cells, helping to properly differentiate different immune cells. So definitely nutrient dense food is going to be important.
So, just for our listeners to kind of relate to immune function, what would be some obvious and maybe not so obvious signs that would tell us our immune system is compromised?
Mhm. Probably the most obvious one is going to be like frequent colds and flus. And it's not even necessarily like the frequency of colds and flus. Sometimes it's also like how long that immune or like that infection lasts. So for some people with like an optimal immune system, you like it's unavoidable in terms of getting sick. And I would argue that it's actually healthier to get sick, and we'll talk about kind of frequency of that. But it's how long that persists. So if you can if you get say a cold once a year, but you're able to fight it off in 2 3 days and bounce back and you're back into routine like within a week, like that's lovely. If it's dragging on 2 3 4 weeks, that can be a sign that your immune system is not firing optimally. This could also be like sinus infections, ear infections. Those can all be like more so obvious signs. Allergies are also a sign of that your immune system is compromised, right? And this is where it's kind of shifting in the opposite direction, or it's an overreactivity of your immune system. And this is where that balance conversation is really important, is that your body is able to discern like self and non-self, but also, is this harmful to me? Is that tree pollen harmful to you? No, you don't need to have this like outrageous response to birch pollen. That's just showing that your immune system is overreactive to that to the external environment. um, Autoimmune conditions are obviously a sign that there is something wrong with the immune system, but it might not be obvious in the presentation that you may have an autoimmune condition. I would say like thyroid issues, especially if like the thyroid issue came out of nowhere, or say the thyroid issue came out of like you had a baby and then all of a sudden you have a thyroid issue. That could be a sign potentially that there's an autoimmune process happening underneath. Certain digestive concerns, again, like if you have strong reactions or certain food allergies or autoimmune reactions like celiac disease, where you have an autoimmune reaction to gluten, those can all be like more subtle signs, but they would need to be thoroughly assessed and get some blood work and an assessment with your doctor.
Okay, interesting. Next question I have for you is about kids. I don't have any kids of my own personally, but I do see a lot of parents and kids coming into the store. And I'm sure in your practice, working with women, you know, you've had these questions or you've seen kind of this question come up often as well, is talking about sickness right now for children. It seems like parents are saying they are picking up everything and anything these days. So I would love to know, why is this happening? What do parents need to know and start doing with their kids right now to support their immune system?
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to the conversation of like it's good to get sick. Obviously not all the time, but just challenging the immune system is really important. And I think that's why we're seeing like kids getting really sick, or that there's a lot of bugs that are persisting, or people getting sick kind of back to back, is that the past couple years with social distancing and masking and things like that, while necessary from a public health perspective and communicable diseases, that our immune system hasn't been challenged. So those little bugs, those like innocent little colds and flus that our immune system can be, it's kind of like weightlifting, right? Where it's like you want those little 5 pound weights and you don't want to just go to like deadlift 250 pounds. We want those little challenges to our immune system, so our that communication is developed more efficiently in the body. Also, when we look at the specialization of immune cells, we also look at memory of immune cells. So if we have a previous infection, our body is going to remember that infection. And then if we get that same infection or similar infection in the future, the body is able to better prepare or mount an immune response. So I think that in the past couple years, like our immune systems haven't been challenged enough, and we're seeing a bit of immune suppression as a result in some of those more benign or kind of innocent infections. It's kind of like daycareitis, like we see a lot of that. Children or petri dishes, so things are kind of passed back and forth, and then they're bringing it home, and parents are getting like sick along with the kids as well. There's a fantastic book that I recommend quite often. It's called Let Them Eat Dirt. And it's kind of the notion that we're almost like too clean for our immune system and our immune system development, and specifically in those kiddos. So research into being outside and touching soil and gardening and like eating, those garden carrots right out of the garden, right, where there's a little bit of soil like bacteria and that kind of stuff, or like being raised with a dog. And there's good research of like having a dog as a pet to help support our immune system. Interestingly, not cats, but I think the dog is quite interesting. But yeah, that's a great book that I typically recommend to parents. So now it's about how can we give their immune system a boost and support kind of that innate environment. And typically it's through like bacteria and development of the gut microbiome, and how that extends to our different systems as well.
Okay, interesting. So, for our listeners, I will leave the name of that book in the show notes for you to look at. And um, Brianna, you just gave everyone permission to get a dog to
Yeah.
support their child's microbiome. I love it.
It's because I want one desperately. So yeah.
Okay, so now that we've talked about, the basic level of the immune system, because we could go in depth on this conversation, we could talk for hours, but for our listeners right now, they kind of understand, what the immune system is, where it's located, what are some signs and symptoms to look out for a weakened immune system. But now I would love to talk about, how we move forward and give our listeners some supportive advice for supporting the immune system. So I was actually on the St. Francis website before our recording today, and I came across the seed approach, and I really, really liked it. I thought it was just a very simple way to kind of cover, all the different aspects of our lives. So essentially, I pulled this quote directly from the St. Francis website. The seed approach is a simple, holistic immune defense strategy that supports balanced, strong immunity through conscious, everyday lifestyle choices and powerful plant medicines to help shield you from infections, plus help you fight back and defend your health when illness strikes. So that's a big mouthful, but I wanted to kind of break that apart with you today and talk about what this approach is and how our listeners can start to implement some of these steps into their daily routines to help them build the balanced immune system that can support them year round. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So just moving through, like SEED is the acronym that we're going to work through at this point in the podcast. So starting right off with S, that is referring to sleep and stress management. And we briefly talked about this already, but can you dive a little bit deeper into what strategies you're recommending for our listeners?
Yeah. So we talked about the impact between obviously cortisol and melatonin, and how that can suppress and also support our immune system respectively. So when I talk about sleep is obviously quite essential to the immune system. A lot of people really struggle with sleep. So it's identifying where the sleep issue is. So is it issues with falling asleep? Is it issues with staying asleep, or both? And we talk in practice quite a lot about like sleep hygiene, so things that are going to give you optimal sleep, and also looking to support like melatonin production. Melatonin production really thrives on when we, and a lot of the sleep hygiene, we talk about like sleep in a cold, dark room. The reason for that is based on melatonin production. They did a really interesting study where they shone a light on the back of somebody's calf when they slept, and you could see their melatonin production drop off significantly, even with that insignificant amount of light, or what seemed like an insignificant amount of light. So definitely a dark room is going to be helpful for supporting melatonin production. And also a cool temperature as well also helps to produce better melatonin through your sleep. So to help you stay asleep, but also all those different immune benefits as well. If the sleep issue is related to things like hormones, like perimenopause, oftentimes like this is not well addressed. And we kind of joke in practice of like, is the sleep issue the issue to go to your gynecologist with, right? Is it a secondary event from the perimenopause? And so who's treating that, right? Because it definitely is related to those hormonal changes. And then a big thing too, like keep your devices out of your room, try and create more of a tranquil environment for sleep, and give yourself as much of an advantage to support sleep as you can. From stress management, I talk to people about stress management because we have these ideal notions of you need to meditate like every single day, and you need to be rigid in how you do that. For me, it's just like, what task or activity or thing gives you singleness of mind, right? So is that being outside and cycling and you're not thinking about your stressful day at work? Is that cooking? Is that baking? Is that snuggling your dog and getting oxytocin from that? Is that painting? Is that pottery? Like, what can you do for you that's helping you to reduce stress and bringing you some joy in your day as well? So it doesn't need to be super rigid, although there are so many benefits with meditation, and it can vary in the type of meditation that you do. Also, beautiful research on like what we call forest bathing, but basically just being outside in the trees to help lower heart rate, blood pressure, help reduce cortisol levels, but also the different volatile oils from the trees helps to increase your immune system function as well. So really, really, and substantial research on that as well.
Awesome. All great points. So again, everyone needs a dog. Next, everyone
Yeah.
needs to get outside, hug a tree. And yeah, I love your point of view of like, I mean, yes, meditation is great. I'm a yoga teacher as well. So I, have some background training in meditation, but it's so hard for some people to get to a meditative state. So sometimes it doesn't need to be sitting in silence. I love using cooking as a way to get some reset really in the body to decrease stress. Walking outside with the dogs. There's so many different daily tasks that people can find enjoyment in and have that kind of rest and to digest and just reset of the body. That doesn't necessarily have to mean you're sitting on a meditation cushion. But question about sleep. Temperature. Do you have like a specific temperature you recommend for people to set their rooms to, or what do you suggest?
Yeah, not necessarily. Because even setting your temperature, it will vary from person to person because they could be sleeping with a different type of quilt or a different weighted blanket. They could be sleeping with a partner or their dog or their children, or like in their bed as well. But something where it's like some people say it's like 19, 20 degrees again. So it's just lower than room temperature. And if you have like a smart thermostat, or you turn your thermostat down before you go to bed, is helpful. Some people will crack open their window so they're getting some fresh air and some cool air as well. But I would say just looking to decrease the temperature in your room. If you're waking up and you're needing to throw off your blankets, you probably need to decrease your temperature, based on your situation in your bed. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, the next part of the seed approach is E, which is eat well and exercise. So, what are your top recommendations for this for our listeners?
Yeah. So when we talk about food, part of that is also it's not what you eat, it's what you absorb. So digestive health is going to be really important with this as well, because if we're not properly breaking down our food and extracting those different nutrients, then we can see some immune suppression with that. But in terms of specific nutrients, like I like to talk about nutrient density, and also like what we call like bioflavonoids or components of like veggies or fruits. And the biggest thing to look for is just color. So it's squash season right now. Carrots are out. So we're seeing those carotenoids and beta carotenes. You can like have your greens, so you're getting chlorophyll, and then you can have your berries, so you're getting those anthocyanins. So they're like, I just like to teach people like it's about color. And I have some families that I work with where their kid gets to pick the two colors that they have on their plate. So you're getting your kids involved with that process, and it's a conscious thing that you're doing with every single meal of like, where can I get those extra colors or get that or increase my nutrient density. And also the variety is important too. For immune health specifically, protein is so important. That is going to be a building block or building component of so many of your different immune cells. Again, protein is helpful for recovery after infection. Protein is important for blood sugar regulation. If you see any one of the doctors at Flow in Edmonton, where I practice, we will probably talk to you about protein because it's so key, not just in digestive health, immune health, but so many other systems and factors within our body. And then when we look at exercise, this is very much a similar conversation in my office about stress management, right? So it's figuring out exercise that works for you, and also can challenge you a little bit as well. If you can exercise outside, even better because you're getting the fresh air. But as we're shifting into winter, although here we've had an unseasonably warm fall, usually we're trick-or-treating in snowsuits, but if you can get outside to exercise, I think that's fantastic. One of the biggest components with exercise, and you can achieve this in ways outside of what you would think of typical exercise, is moving your lymphatic tissue, okay? Or so promoting circulation. And I had this one mom who had a couple of kids and like super busy, and she's like, I can't leave for like scheduled exercise. And I'm like, are you open to cold showers or contrast showers? And she was like, yep, totally game. I need to shower anyways. And cold showers, or that is a means of moving circulation or moving your lymphatic tissue, because there's this contrast in temperature, which is creating movement of circulation. So any way that we can move our lymph is going to be important. So whether that be contrast showers, hydrotherapy, dry brushing, rebounders, and again, exercise, because you're increasing your heart rate, you're increasing your blood pressure, therefore you're increasing your circulation. Moving your lymphatic tissue and circulation is going to mobilize those different immune cells, and keep them active and keep them with surveillance in the body. And also muscle mass is important for immune health. Our muscle will actually function like a hormonal or immunological tissue, from blood sugar regulation to various outputs of different hormones and immune factors. So muscle density, so strength training, resistance training, all of those things I think are key and should be incorporated into some type of movement routine. But again, exercise will totally vary from individual to individual. If cycling is not your thing, maybe swimming is, or maybe yoga or racquetball or pickleball, like whatever that looks like, just making sure we're getting our heart rate up, we're increasing our circulation, and keeping that muscle tissue active.
Yeah, find something that you truly love to do, like because you're going to be doing it essentially and hopefully for the rest of your life in some form. So finding what like really, really brings you joy while you're moving your body and supporting your immune system for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, second E is ensure equilibrium. I was a little unsure on what this really meant. So what does it mean? And how does this, affect the immune system?
Equilibrium is essentially what we've been talking about, a balanced immune system. And so it's not an overactive or an underactive immune system, but it's at this equilibrium, or in science and physiology, we call this homeostasis, or this state of balance and equilibrium. And like the emotion I associate with is like contentment, like things are just neutral. When it comes to the balanced immune system, why this is important, again, it's all about, can your immune cells differentiate between what is self and non-self? And is this harmful or beneficial, right? So food is not self, it's foreign, but it's not harmful to us, right? So we don't want to mount an immune reaction to that. So balance is going to be key. So we don't want to, again, we want to prevent that overactive versus underactive, and make sure our cells are discerning to what is important that we need, and what is non-beneficial or that we need to mount a response to.
Okay, last letter in the SEED approach is D, which is defend. So, can you tell our listeners now how to be more proactive and support their body starting today to bring that equilibrium through the body and really support their immune system?
So when we're looking at this defend step, because there are different herbal components that can support the equilibrium, and so this is what we call our deep immune system, or our innate immune system. So it's kind of like what I talked about before, where it's like that bubbling under the surface, right? The immune system is primed, the immune system is strong, and it will mount a response when it's appropriate to do so. When we're supporting this equilibrium or this balanced immune system, we're looking at, again, all of these different lifestyle factors and nutrition and sleep and all that stuff that we've already talked about. But there are different plant compounds that can support this balance of our immune system. This is one of the key plant molecules that does this are called polysaccharides. And polysaccharides are these long sugar chains that are actually indigestible by the body, and will look to support through the GALT, the mechanism of heightening or supporting our different immune cells. And when we look at these different polysaccharides, these long sugar chains are in things like medicinal mushrooms. So this would be things like reishi, or shiitake, maitake, turkey tail. These beta D glucans, or these different polysaccharides, help to bring balance and communication within the immune system. There are also herbs called adaptogens, and adaptogens do exactly what you would associate them doing. They help you adapt to stress. And in helping us to adapt to stress, which is any deviation away from normal, we're looking to bring balance to our system. So it creates better resilience to these stressors. Now, all adaptogens are going to have some benefit on the immune system, but there are a kind of key group of immune adaptogens that are more specific to the immune system. And this will be things like astragalus or codonopsis. Again, reishi is considered an immune adaptogen as well. And all of these different polysaccharides, and kind of getting more technical into triterpenes and saponins, these are important for, again, that balance or regulation of that deep immune system. Now, when we go into defend mode, which is where we're stimulating or kind of kicking up that immune system to have a response to an infection, this is going to be through various immune stimulants, and specific herbal compounds that can initiate that mobilization of those key white blood cells that can attack the infection. There are some kind of key products or combinations which are quite useful, but one herb that is really important is echinacea. And St. Francis has done a really great job of pulling the research and the literature on the best strains of echinacea, because there's multiple formats of echinacea. And one of the key kind of ways to support with echinacea is the right extraction. So echinacea actually needs quite a high amount of alcohol to extract those active compounds or constituents that will stimulate the immune system. And it does better in combination of these two different species. So Echinacea angustifolia and Echinacea purpurea. So on a lot of the St. Francis products, you'll see Echinacea 2 plus, and that means that we're using both of those species together. Now, research has shown that using both of these species together makes it more bioavailable, meaning your body can absorb and assimilate these compounds, but it also prolongs the effect and prevents those compounds from being broken down too quickly. Because we want those compounds circulating in our blood, stimulating the immune system into action so we can mount a response. So using both those species together makes it more effective. So Echinacea is a really great herb to defend or to stimulate the immune system into action. And there's some other great antiviral herbs like elderberry. There's also andrographis, which is not for the faint at heart. Andrographis is one of the true antiviral herbs, whereas it doesn't just stimulate the immune system to be antiviral or to attack viruses, but it will also work on the virus itself, so preventing viral replication, so meaning that the virus can continue to replicate and to prolong its effect in our system. It will kind of stop that process. And then there are, again, kind of combinations as well. Echinacea is probably one of my favorite St. Francis products. It's a combination of echinacea, so both of those species, hydrastis or golden seal, a ton of antimicrobial herbs that are specific to like the upper respiratory tract, so the throat and the sinuses and the lungs, and also it has cayenne for increasing circulation, so we're mobilizing immune cells but also flushing out the infection as well. And I just as a personal note, I've been using echinacea since I was their student rep in like 2015, and I have not progressed to a full cold or flu since 2015, with the exception of COVID, but I did quite well with my infection. It was more so me just staying home so I didn't pass anything along to my patients. But yeah, since using echinacea, I have not progressed to a full cold or flu. The key difference is that I have been able to mount an immune response. Like I get that, little tickle in the back of my throat, or that sign like, oh, I'm getting sick, or I'm feeling a little run down. And that's when I would take the echinacea to just mount my immune response, and then it stops it or nips it right in the bud. So I found it to be a really useful product.
Okay, so I just want to do a quick recap about some of those products. So, when you mentioned like a full combination of those different, the mushrooms, the adaptogenic herbs, the echinacea. So, all three of those types of constituents can be found in the St. Francis Deep Immune, correct?
So for the equilibrium step, so essentially the deep immune, or kind of the preventative aspect of your immune health, is going to be in the deep immune. And that's a family of products. So we have our deep immune original. There's also a deep immune that is licorice free. So for those who can't have licorice, like if there are blood pressure issues or certain medications that you couldn't have licorice, that could be a suitable alternative. We also have that in capsules, and then we have a children's version as well of the deep immune. For the defend, or this is basically when you want to stimulate your immune system into action when you realize you're gonna get sick. For me, that telltale sign is like that little tickle in the back of my throat. For some people, it might be like they get a headache. For some people, they start developing a little bit of a fever, and that's when we would want to use our immune stimulants, and that would be things like the echinacea, the combination echinacea That's one that I've found to be really effective. There's also Vireffect, which is a fabulous product that has the andrographis if it seems to be like more like feverish and body aches. That the Vireffect I find can be really effective and substantial. And then the kids products, so the elderberry, the echinacea for kids with elderberry syrup, and that's the alcohol-free version. But there's also multiple formats of echinacea for the kiddos too.
Amazing. Okay, so deep immune, like, is that something people would take year round then?
Yes, yeah. So deep immune, again, that's more about that balance of your immune system. It's that preventative aspect. So that can be taken year round. And especially if you're someone, again, that overactive immune system, you're more prone to allergies. If you're working on, say, spring allergies, your work would be starting now, right? And supporting the balance of your immune system to prevent the occurrence of allergies, say in the spring when you would notice those symptoms. And what we typically recommend is cycling on deep immune. So it'd be like 3 weeks on, 1 week off. And the analogy that I use for that is kind of like wearing an ankle brace for your games when you want that extra support and protection. But then challenging that joint in practice or your training and that kind of thing. So it's just evolving and supporting the strength of your immune system from multiple angles. So we cycle 3 weeks on, 1 week off. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So for our listeners, I will leave the products that Brianna mentioned and the way in which you use it. So for balancing that equilibrium year round with the deep immune, and then also that defense mode where we need to stimulate the immune system. I'll leave those products and her recommendations in the description below when you click through to the show notes. So don't stress if you didn't write that down. It'll be on our Joanne's Place website. And if you guys have any other questions about these products or about the immune system, be sure to pop into Joanne's Place and talk to one of our staff. And we also have some of these amazing St. Francis products on sale for the month of November. So be sure to pick those up and stock your cupboards full of them just to get into that preventative and supportive health of the immune system. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Brianna. It's been an amazing time talking to you and getting to learn a little bit more about you, your practice, and how our community can support our immune system. And I look forward to chatting with you again in the future. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
If you guys are still here, thank you so much for checking out today's episode. You know what to do now. Be sure to subscribe to our channels so you're notified as soon as a new episode is released. And also find us on social media and share that you are listening to the Wellness on Purpose podcast.